Hello, everybody. Today we're going to go back to the 2020 presidential map and we're going to see how each state voted relative to the national popular vote. A few weeks ago, we did this for 2024. Today it's going to be for 2020. First, we've got to get our baseline and get the national popular vote. Now, we're not going to use a spreadsheet this time, but in 2020, Joe Biden got 51.3, Donald Trump got 46.8. That's a margin of 4.5 for Biden. So any state that had a margin above that is going to be bluer. Any state that had a margin below that is going to be redder. We're going to use some shading here. The darkest colors are going to be 10 or more points. 5 to 9.9 are going to be the next tier. Then we've got 1 to 4.9, and then anything under 1%, those are going to be the tilt margins or the lightest colors. So we're going to go through it alphabetically. First up, we've got Alabama. There, Donald Trump won that state by 25.4. That's in the opposite direction of that 4.5 point national blue vote. So that's 4.5 points away from Biden. That gets us back to even. Then another 25.4 toward Trump. That comes out to a relative red vote of 29.9% for Trump. In Alaska, that relative number is 14.5% redder. Arizona, that voted for Biden by 0.3, but that was way less than the 4.5 point national popular vote. So that relative percentage is 4.2% red for the Republicans. Arkansas voted 32.1% more Republican than the nation at large. California is the first blue state. It voted 29.2 for Biden. The difference between that and the 4.5 point national popular vote means that this state voted 24.7 more Democratic than the entire country. Colorado was relatively bluer by 9 points. Also in that direction, we've got Connecticut at 15.5 and Delaware at 14.4. Florida was relatively redder by 7.8. Georgia again won by Biden, but it was still relatively 4.2% redder than the entire country. Hawaii relatively bluer by 24.7. Idaho a lot redder at 35.3, while Illinois was relatively bluer at 12.4. Now we've got some red states. We've got Indiana at 20.5, Iowa 12.7, Kansas 19.1, Kentucky 30.4, and Louisiana 23.1. Now some relatively blue states. We've got Maine at large at 4.6. The first congressional district is a lot bluer. That was by 18.6. The second district is redder by an even 12. Then in Maryland, we've got it a lot bluer at 28.7. Massachusetts, very similar at an even 29. Michigan, again, won by Biden. But relative to the country, it was redder by 1.7. Minnesota, opposite side, at 2.6. Now more red states. We've got Mississippi at 21, Missouri 19.9, Montana 20.8, and Nebraska at large at 23.5. Nebraska's first is redder by 19.4. Nebraska's second, that's the blue district, by 1.9. And the third district, the reddest place in the country, at 57.6. In Nevada, it voted blue, but not by a wide enough margin. It was relatively redder at 2.1. New Hampshire, bluer at 2.8. New Jersey, same direction at 11.4. New Mexico, 6.3. And New York, 18.7. Then we've got another batch of red states. We've got North Carolina at 5.8. North Dakota, 32 points redder at 37.8. Ohio, 12.6. Oklahoma, almost the same as North Dakota at 37.6. In Oregon, that state voted 11.6% bluer than the rest of the country. Pennsylvania voted redder by 3.3. Rhode Island, bluer by 16.3. South Carolina, almost the exact opposite direction at 16.2. Then it's going to be redder in South Dakota at 30.7. Tennessee, 27.7. Texas cracks double digits at 10.1. And Utah, 24.9. Vermont was relatively the bluest state on here at 30.9. Virginia, way less blue, but still at 5.6. Washington, 14.7. West Virginia, a ton redder at 43.4. Wisconsin, mildly redder at 3.8. And Wyoming was the reddest state on here at 47.8. Then we've got Washington, D.C., extremely bluer at 82.3. So that's it. Those are all of the states and how they voted relative to the national popular vote of 4.5 for Biden. The main takeaway here is all the swing states flipped from blue to red this time, except for North Carolina. That one was already won by Trump, but it did go up from lean to likely status. Some of the other mildly blue states get a little bit more competitive, like Minnesota and New Hampshire. Other than that, the map is going to be the same. This is different from 2024, where Donald Trump won that popular vote by 1.5, and that's 6 points redder than this map right here. But the margins in the swing states were won by Trump. However, they were not by overwhelming margins. The bigger gains for Trump were shifts in deep light blue states like California or New Jersey, New York. That's how Trump did a lot better in the popular vote, but the swing states were still relatively competitive. However, back here in 2020, that was definitely a unique election in the midst of COVID with a lot higher turnout, mail-in balloting that gave Biden the win in the purple states, but you could see the margins were not at all convincing, and relative to the rest of the country, using the current electoral votes, 312 of those were relatively more Republican and 226 were relatively more Democratic. In between there was redistricting, but even so, aside from the previous videos we've done on shifts and trends, this is how the states voted relative to the national popular vote in 2020. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of the data on this map? Which states do you think stand out as not being as red or blue as you might have expected? And do you notice anything else on this map compared to the map for 2024? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.